What's up, guys? Welcome to the second episode of Stats Don't Lie. We're going to be going over the September update for stats, but specifically it's going to be about the neighborhoods. Now, when I was putting this together, I really wanted to create a story that made sense from the data given. And that story today is going to be the best neighborhoods to buy. So let's get started. Now, just as a general disclaimer, the 4 things I do need to note. First is none of this is financial advice. This is only my opinion simply. This is infotainment purposes for education for you. And lastly, that they're jokes, nothing else meant for it, not offensive at all. If you do like this video, please like, share, and subscribe. It does take me a long time to put together videos like this. Please follow me on all of my social media platforms if you do want to follow me along on my journey and get some education and fun on the way. And lastly, contact me for any of your real estate needs. Now, to get to the answer of what's the best neighborhood to buy, there's a few questions that I thought of that I needed to answer and therefore share with you before we got started. Those questions are, what are the price differences between those neighborhoods and potentially home types, such as a single-family home and condos on Oahu? And the second thing is, what do the non-price stats say to potentially get to the answer of what prices are going to do in the future? Because ultimately, that's going to answer that question of what neighborhoods are best to buy. Now, in looking at these and framing it, that context is very key. When we look at price simply, it's a lagging indicator. It takes literally 3, 4, or 5 months for the price to show up in the stats from the time that it's listed. Therefore, by the time that it does show up, it isn't a very good indicator of what's going to happen in the future. So a lot of the stats that will share that are your leading indicators, and I'll go over that with you to get to that answer, again, of what the best neighborhood in the future is it to buy. Now, when we first look at it, I actually put together all the data. I put it in a nice chart for you. It's very difficult to read, and it's very difficult also for me to try to get some type of conclusion. So the solution I found is that I'm going to put them all on the map to try to give you an idea of it. And ultimately, the single family and condo market sometimes diverges and sometimes is the same, but we'll go over that as we go along. Now, if we look at the neighborhood price differences specifically for the single family, and you plot it on a map, this is what I see. The green are the high gainers way above the average, and the red are your laggers. And it's pretty clear that when you look at the urban core, that everything right outside of the urban core are those that are the laggers. And the big gainers are actually the ones as you're getting closer to the north, the central side of the island, that those are the gainers for the single family. But is it the same for the condos? When you look at it from this angle, you actually see somewhat similar of a story, that the laggers are actually more inside the city, and your gainers are those that are outside of the city. So somewhat similar, somewhat different. But I did want to put them all together into one chart, so I combined the single family and condos together. As you can see here, I plotted it on the map, and this is what I saw. Is that overall the trend data for the neighborhoods, if you're kind of talking about a heat map, is to say the following: that your high gainers are right outside of the urban core and going more towards your central and west Oahu and even your north Oahu, while a lot of the laggers are inside. Now, if that's what the prices say of where it's been from last year, the combination of the beginning of last year to September versus the same period this year, what does that say about the future? Now, I always like to look at it from the perspective of supply and demand, because that's what the marketplace is all about. So you have the combination of your buyers and the sellers, and how they move and how the trend data is and how that balances will really reflect the market in summation. If you look at it specifically from the supply side first, what you see is the following, is that for the single family market, that is pretty clear that supply actually decreased, and by a significant margin. 11% island-wide for the supply decrease, and a lot of the neighborhoods are saying the same story. But there are some neighborhoods that are not showing that decrease. And I'll go over that when we go over the map. Now, when you look at the condos, it's somewhat of a similar story, but what you see is that there's a lot less change in the supply, which sort of means that it's much more consistent of a market from a supply standpoint, and therefore it should be more consistent potentially from the pricing. Now, if you plot it on the map, again, we're trying to find some trend data of, potentially what buyer psychology is, or where the demand is moving, or where the supply is moving as well. What you see here is that the lowest supply is actually in your urban core, and your highest supply is your north and west of the core. If you change it to condos, the question becomes, is it similar? What you see here is the high supply is actually in the urban core, and a lot of the lowest supply are going to be in the outlying regions. And so this is where the divergence between your home types starts to show up. Now, if you look at it from the demand side, what you see here, again, the chart says a lot of the data, and I'll put it together on the map as well, is that compared to the new listings, which is down 11%, the demand is actually down a significant amount more. So you're seeing 11% supply down versus your demand down 20%, and therefore it'll impact prices on the downside. But what you see here is that a lot of the demand has been consistently in that negative double-digit range, with very rarely any areas or neighborhoods that are showing that there hasn't been a change, the only one being Mililani. Now, if you look at it from the condo perspective, it is less as well. While your new listings are only down 4%, your demand is 12%. So you're seeing somewhat of a 2 or 3 times amount of your supply and demand change, but on the condo side, it is less. And you also see it from the pending sales, again, a demand metric, that a lot of them are showing consistently across the board, with only the North Shore and your Ala Moana showing not a difference in the demand. Now, if you plot it on the chart as well, what you see is this, is that your highest demand is more of your central Oahu going up to the North Oahu, with a lot of the lowest demand for your single family being all along this area, which is to say that all along the urban core to East Honolulu, you're seeing the highest decrease in demand, aka your lowest demand, and kind of following up the north and the west side. Now, on the condo side, you see somewhat of a similar story, but maybe a little different. So what you're seeing is, from a demand perspective, that in the urban core, you actually see a high amount of demand, and outside of it, from everywhere, you're seeing that that demand is going down. Now, if you're kind of looking at it and trying to figure out for a stat of what the balance is, the best indicator on the MLS that is available for the neighborhood's perspective is going to be your median days on market. Now, what that means is effectively the days on market from when it starts to when it gets under contract, that's considered your days on market, and they plot it in the different neighborhoods. One of the biggest reasons I tried to do the entire last year versus this year is you'll see a lot of variability in the season. And this gives a best indicator of what the trend is, but we'll actually go over a little bit later, putting together with some recency of trying to put it into one indicator or composite score. But specifically for median days on market, what you're seeing here is that overall for the island, for single family, it increased 22%. Now, what that means is that there has been a significant slowdown in that balance, in which it used to be very high on the demand side and very low on the supply side, and you're seeing it getting closer to the balance itself. Now, it was unsustainable the last couple of years, specifically for the single family home area, so this doesn't say that the market is completely done. It just means that the market has to come back to more of a balanced perspective. But what you see here is that there are actually quite a bit of areas from that balance side that are both below and above the average. Now, from the condo side, you see it's somewhat similar. You'll see that skew from the above average to below average, but what you see here is from the days on market, it actually hasn't changed. Again, what it's showing is that it's been much more consistent of a market, and the result should be, theoretically, from a days on market perspective, that you'll have a more consistent market. Hasn't had as many ups, won't have as many downs. But again, you see the difference in the neighborhoods. So when you plot it on a chart, this is what you see, is that for the single family market, that your highest demand is everything outside of really your West Honolulu. And what that says is effectively that the market is strongest in all the areas from a days on market perspective of that balance, and there hasn't been as much of a change except for that areas. And for the condos, I think the biggest question I had going into this before I started this is to say, okay, well, is it similar and has it changed? Well, it's fairly consistent in which your urban core, that the days on market hasn't adjusted too much, while everything on the west to North Honolulu, North Oahu rather, are down in terms of demand, in terms of the balance. Therefore, the highest supply change has going to be outside of your urban core going towards your North Shore. So it's somewhat similar in terms of what you're seeing overall from a balance perspective between your single family and condo market. Now, I wanted to put it together into a conclusion, and for those of you that came because of my 1-minute snippet, here's the good stuff. Now, if we're looking at neighborhoods and just bringing it together into what best neighborhood means, it's hard to get a real answer because you have two different ways to approach a question. The first one is going to be the strongest neighborhood in terms of a price floor, and the second one is going to be the best deal neighborhood, therefore the biggest change going down to get the best sale. I put together a calculation that was a composite score of your supply, your demand, that balance, and recency through this month's days on market to try to calculate the trend of strength and weakness and rank it in one specific number. And when I did that, this is what I plotted. Green, of course, is good. From a strength perspective, red is not good. This one specifically for single family, and then we're going to look at condos right here, and we're going to plot it on the neighborhood chart right after we show what the specific neighborhoods there are. Now, if we're looking specifically at the strong neighborhoods for the single family, you have your Kalihi, Wailai, Kapahulu, Kailua, and downtown, which is very similar in terms of being in the urban core. And for condos, you have Moanalua, Makiki, Waikiki, Pearl City, and Makaha, which definitely seems a little bit more scattered. If you look at it from the weakest or market or the best deal neighborhood, what you see is somewhat different. At Kaneohe, North Shore, Moanalua, Ainahaina, and Makaha for single families are the best deals, and those seem to be outside the urban core. And for condos, it's your Kailua, Eva Beach, Waikai, your Wahua, and your Wailai for the condos. So if you put it on a map specifically for single family, green is single family, red is condo. This is not good and bad. What you see is none of them really overlap, especially for the demand side. And your high demand is right outside of the urban core. And for condos, it's in the urban core. While when you look at it from the best deal perspective, what you're seeing is the exact opposite, is that it's further outside of the urban core for your high supply or your best deals. Now, if we percolate it into a key thoughts or final conclusions of what you're starting to see, is that what it shows to me is that there is some type of reversion to the mean, in that those laggards from the last year look to be the ones best poised to make a run when the market turns. Or specifically for the neighborhoods, it definitely seems from a buyer perspective that during COVID, that they wanted homes outside the urban core, but as we get closer to the post-COVID world, that all the typical trends that we remember of traffic being in the urban core because of that time and where you spend that time is going to be impactful on pricing again as we get closer to COVID. Now, I thought that this was going to be the case when COVID first started, but I didn't realize how long it would take. We are literally almost 3 years when COVID started, and you're really only starting to see those numbers that are rolling in to say that this as a long-term trend may not be 100% the case, because people are people and they do what they want to do, which is at the end of the day socialize, spend time doing things that they can, and lessening the amount of time once again, traffic gets started are going to be impactful on their life and therefore are going to impact their buyer decisions. And again, that reversion to the mean is the prices that do come up are going to come down and therefore the laggers are going to come back up. Now the takeaways for you as a buyer is to say that the best neighborhood, when you look at the data, is actually still subjective. And it's much more dependent on the why you're buying and those top 5 criteria of what you're looking for. Because if you're looking for price, you're looking for best deal. If you're looking for strength, or conversely, maybe trying to spend the least amount of time in traffic, you're probably going to be looking in the urban core. And for those of you that are thinking or on the fence of buying itself, of the market fell apart, what it's showing from last year to this year is that both supply and demand has gone down. And it's very interesting to think about because the buyer psychology affects the sellers and the buyers. And if sellers aren't going to sell, supply isn't going to come on the market. Therefore, it's still going to be much more of a balanced market than what you think of as falling off the cliff. And if you're a buyer in this down market, again, we're thinking about it in the perspective of what's a good deal or buying on sale, and it gives you so much more power than it used to the last couple years, where me as an agent, I couldn't negotiate price. It was really pushing my buyers to bring in the most amount of money to get the deal because everyone else was doing the same thing. So for you now as a buyer, you have a choice both on the home selection because there is more supply on the market for you to choose from, and also from a negotiation standpoint of I want to buy it for this price, take it or leave it, seller. And that is actually the market I love more because giving you options and what I can do as an agent for you, that I have more power to negotiate. I have more power to say, hey, we're going to walk away. This is literally the only offer you're going to get, and trying to explain to them why this is the best choice for you. So going into this, overall, I think that there are a lot of options for you. As a buyer, obviously interest rates are higher and you're already seeing it in the impact of the numbers. But if you think about it from the perspective of are we closer to top interest rates or the bottom, I think it's very clear that the interest rates aren't going to hike significantly more. I mean, hopefully, I don't have a crystal ball, but what that means is we are closer to the bottom than where you may think. And in a future video, I'll actually share with you specifically about using the historical data, some of my own thoughts, using some of the macro data of interest rates, where we're tracking for bonds, your 10 and 2-year rates, to give you sort of more data and more firepower of saying, okay, where are we in the market? Where are we going to move forward? And how can I make the best purchase moving forward? Of course, obviously, none of this is financial advice. This is all just information to help you be an informed buyer to make the best decision. And remember, a lot of the reasons you buy is to live, and those are long-term decisions. And therefore, when you're buying, it's a little bit different than if you're buying specifically to get the Pico bottom or the Pico top. Because if any of you have actually invested, please put in the comments if you actually ever bought the bottom or sold the top, because I'm looking for you to give me financial advice. Thank you so much. And if you do want to follow me, learn more about what I do, follow me on my journey, or just want more content that hopefully is entertaining for you or insightful, please check me out on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, where I'll be posting this video and giving you much more long form content that it's very difficult on social media to do. So thank you so much and have a great rest of your day.